B'ez Hashem, today's daf is daf Gimel. Daf Gimel. Before we begin, I'm just review that what the Gemara is very interestingly struggling in how to explain this word called drachim. The isha, it gets acquired with three drachim, ways. And the question is, the more common word is devarim, like you say elu devarim, right? So why does it say drachim, these ways? So the Gemara gives you two answers. One is that since each one of these, kesef, shtar, and a bia, the point of getting engaged is so that you should go to chuppah and have bia with your wife, have relations with your wife. So this is the derech to go to finish off the job. You first have to take step one of doing erison. So therefore, it says the word derech. It's not to have long engagements. Basically, you should be on the road to finish up with a chuppah and a marriage. That's one reason. Another reason the Gemara gave, it says derech. If you remember, we ended off, is it tells you it's really instructions to a man. It's the derech of a man to find his isha, to find his wife. It's not the derech of a lady to search for the man. And therefore, there are steps that a man has to take and his shtadlus he has to take until he finds his zivuk. And that's why right away there's a change in language in the beginning, first Mishnah, Masechta Kedushin. So now we go to Amid Beis, and we're going to start from like 4 lines of Beis, Amid Beis. That we learned in the Mishnah. So basically, we have to start explaining away in other areas, in other Mishnayos, where it says the word derech and it doesn't say the word dvarim. That we learned, Shivat Sayin Drachim, Boitkin Esazav, 4 lines from the bottom of Beis and Beis. On 7 ways, a zav will check himself to see if he's tameh. Listen to dvarim. Let it say the word dvarim because dvarim is the more common word. Why does it say shiva drachim? Boitkin Esav. Zav has to see that. Why did he have the seminal emission, the sickly seminal emission? He has to see if there was not another cause for it. So why does it say drachim? Answers the Gemara, Hasam Hakamashmalon. It's teaching you the darker the mechli yaseira, the way of eating a lot of food, that brings for a person to have a sickly seminal emission beyond your control. The darker the mishteya yasera, if you drink a lot, I guess if you drink a lot of warm stuff, warm liquids or wine, that brings you to have a zav emission. So that's why it says the word drachim in that Mishnah in Masechta Zavim. That we learned in the Mishnah Esrog, we learned in the Mishnah Rosh Hashanah. Esrog shavel ilim begimel drachim, and Esrog has qualities like a tree in 3 ways, and basically Esrog is like the in-between type of tree. It's not totally a fruit, and it's not totally a vegetable. So in the Mishnah it says that Esrog is like a tree in 3 ways, in that it has the dinim of Orla, it has the dinim of Netaravai, and it also, regarding Shemitah, you always look at when the qualities deciding what you're going to do with the fruit depends on the year that it had chanata, it blossomed. Not when you picked it, but when it blossomed. So in Esrog, when it comes to these 3 things, the Ravai, Erla, Ravai, and Shemitah, we will follow it as if it's a tree. Right? So the question is, listen to Devarim. I basically, sometimes you'll have a tree, by the way, that you'll make a hadama on the fruit of the tree, like bananas. So some things are in between. So the question is, back into why doesn't it say Esrog is begimel Devarim equal to a tree? Answers the Gemara, Mishum de ba'oin masan seifa, because the end of the Mishnah wants to say uli yerek, an esrog is like a vegetable, but derechechan in 1 way. So again, so it wants to use derech at the end of the Mishnah, so it uses derech in the beginning of the Mishnah. So the Gemara asks, again, seifa namin davar. Then in the end of the Mishnah, it also should use the word davar. It should be compared to davar echad, like a vegetable. Why does it use the word derech? We go to Gimel Amud Aleph. So the Gemara says, Hasam Hakamashmalit. It teaches you a characteristic of an esrog tree. The darker the esrog, the way that you grow and you make an esrog tree produce good fruits is kiyerek, like a vegetable. In what way is an esrog tree like a vegetable? Ma yerek darker ligodal akol mayim. Just like a vegetable, besides rainwater, you have to actually feed it with irrigation water. That's called al kol mayim. It grows on all waters. And therefore, ubishas, a vegetable, ubishas likutasai isurai. What determines what meiser you're going to give is when you pick the vegetable. If you pick the vegetable in the first and the second year, then you are going to give it meiser sheni. If you picked it in the third year, you'll give meiser ani. But even if it like blossomed in the second year, if though you don't go after where the second year, you go after actually to deciding what meiser you're going to give on this vegetable is when you picked it. So that's the dinam of a vegetable. Af esrog, so also an esrog tree, darkoi ligdal al kol mayim. The way to grow an esrog tree is to give it not only rainwater. You can't rely on rainwater. You have to also water it down with irrigation water. So therefore, since it's similar to a yerek, that's why what's going to determine an esrog tree regarding maisris is going to be very different than an apple tree. An apple tree, you determine what maisris you're going to give. It depends on the year that the apple began its blossom on the tree. That will determine what meiser you're going to give for that apple. But with regard to an esrog, since the way it grows similar to a vegetable. Therefore, what's going to determine the maisris is going to be the year that you picked it. So therefore, it's darka. It wants to tell you why we saying an esrog is like a yerek, because it has the same characteristics as a yerek, as a vegetable. That's why it's more appropriate to use the word derech. New Gemara. Then we have another question. It says in another Mishnah, kai is like an animal, an undetermined animal, right? An animal that we don't know will be classified in the Jewish terms as a behema, as an animal, or, and therefore, let's say an animal, its fats are usser, or are you going to classify it as a chaya, a wild animal, and therefore the fats are mutter, but it needs kisi adam. When you slaughter it, you'll have to cover the blood. So they couldn't determine what a koi is. It part of a behema, or is it like a chaya? So the Mishnah says yesh boy durachim. It has ways shavel a chaya, that you're going to say that the koi is like a chaya. The yesh boy durachim shavel a behema, and there's some ways you're going to say that the koi is like an animal, like a behema. The yesh durachim shavel a chaya behema. And some ways it's going to be like both a wild animal and a regular animal, and that's that in order to eat it, you're going to have to shecht it. It's not like a fish that you don't have that you don't shech, but it's going to be similar to both. And some ways you're going to say it's not an animal, not a wild animal, and it's not a domestic animal. In case you want to do klayim, you determine it's not a wild animal, not a regular animal. But the point is, in other words, it's usher to do klayim. So, but the point is, why does it say derech over there? Nisnei devarim. Why does it say derech over there? It should say the word devarim, the more common use. V'su, and another question, the Mishnah says, Hodetnan, there's another Mishnah. We learned this Mishnah, that a person brings a get from Medina Sayyam to Eretz Yisrael, you have to say, b'fani nechtam, b'fani nechtam. And the Mishnah says, Zu achas midracham, this is one of the ways that the get document has the same laws as the freedom document when you're freeing a slave. That if you bring a freedom document to free a slave from Medina Siyam to Eretz Yisrael, you have to say b'fani nechtam. Again, drachim. Why didn't you say the word devarim? The words. These are the things that they're equal. These are the halachas. Drachim is ways. Ella, so the Gemara goes back and says a new reason. When in the Mishnayos will they use the word drachim? Kol heicha, in any situation, the ika plukta, when there's two roads, it's this road but not that road. For example, it says that Isha gets acquired by kesef shtar ubia, but the road that you can't acquire a woman is with just doing chuppah, bringing her under a canopy. So it's this road, but not this road. Or you're saying that these are one of the things that Giti Noshim are similar to Shchure Avodim, but they're similar. There are things that they are not similar, because if you give your get over to a shliach, you could regret it. You could call it back and say, I changed my mind. But if you give, because it's not a good thing for a woman to be divorced. But once you give the freedom document to a shliach to give to an eved, you can't say, I want it back, because he's going to acquire it on behalf of the eved without his knowledge, because it's the slave's benefit to go free. So in some ways they are similar, but in some ways they're not. That's why you use derech. So derech is saying this way it's yes, and that way it's no. But if there's only one road to follow, and this is it, Tana Devarim, that's why you use the word Devarim. Daikinami, the Tani Sefer. Let's take a look. I'll prove it to you. Look at the language of the Mishnah at the end of the Mishnah, on the opinion of Rabbi Eliezer. Rabbi Eliezer, Oima, Esrik Shava Le'ilam. Esrik is always going to be like a regular fruit tree. L'chol davar, in anything. So if you're saying it's totally like a tree, and there's no other road not to follow, you use the word davar, shmamino. So again, derech is used when you're saying this way, but not this way. But when something is absolute in one direction, then you use the word davar. Next, Gemara. The Gemara is questioning, why does the Mishnah say, Ha'isha niknas b'shalosh derachim, right? B'shalosh derachim. And the koines atzma, and it goes free, and a woman could acquire her independence b'shtei drachim in two ways. So the Gemara's question is, minyana dereisha lemutemai. Why does the Mishnah say the counting of shalosh in the beginning of the Mishnah? What is that trying to exclude? That only this, but not that. Minyana desefer lemutemai. Why does it say koines atzma b'shtei drachim? What's that trying to exclude? This, but not that. So the Gemara explains, Miyana Dereisha, the reason why it says 3 in the beginning of the Mishnah, in Lema'ute Chuppah, that to say, Chuppah, if a person, you can't acquire a woman by just going to Chuppah, by just standing under a canopy. Let's call it Chuppah, just standing under a canopy and saying brachos. That wouldn't be enough to acquire a woman. You still need the first step of doing kesef or shtar. So therefore, that's what it's excluding. A chuppah would not work in acquiring a woman if you just jump to the last step. Says the Gemara, Ula Rav Huna the Amar, according to Rav Huna, chuppah kaina mikal v'chayim lemutemai. According to Rav Huna, chuppah would actually work from a kal v'chayim, and therefore Rav Huna says, if chuppah works at the end, certainly it could work to make erusin. If chuppah could finalize the kedushin, certainly it could start things up. And Kal V'chomer makes it almost like a daraisa that would work. So according to Rav Huna, there are actually 4 ways you could acquire a woman: kesef, shtar, bia, or if you're cheap, you go straight to the chuppah. So if according to Rav Huna, why does the Mishnah say 3? Lamute mai, what it's trying to exclude. Answers the Gemara, Lamute chalipin. There's another method of acquiring items. And the way to acquire something, let's say you want to acquire a field, and you don't have the cash to pay for it, but you want to solidify the deal that there's no backsies. So what happens is that the purchaser will take a handkerchief, give it to the seller, and the seller will, in his mind's eye, will makna the field, sell the field to the person that gave him the handkerchief. So it's like chalipin, in exchange. And that works when you're buying a field, but it will not work when you will purchase a wife. Because I would have thought, since we learned that kesef works in acquiring a woman, because you learn it from Avram Avinu, who purchased the Ma'aras HaMachpelah with money. So you would think, Avram Avinu bought a field with money. So Ma'aseh, that just like a regular field, mikanya b'chalipin, will work if you use chalipin. Af ishanami mikanya b'chalipin. So also buying a woman, it would also work with chalipin. I would have thought that way. Kamash Malan, that chalipin is not a good way to acquire a woman. It's only kesef, shtar, bia, or you could use chuppah according to Rav Huna, but not chalipin when you're just giving a no-value handkerchief to the lady, and she's going to be saying to herself, "Oh, I want to be his husband. I'm selling myself to this man." It would not work. So the Gemara says, why wouldn't it work? It doesn't. Why shouldn't it work? Just like it works in purchasing a field, it should work when you're purchasing a woman. And it's Gemara, chalipim isnuhu b'pachos mishava pruta. The concept of chalipin can happen even when it's less than a shava pruta. The value of that handkerchief that the purchaser gives to the seller of the field could be worth less than a penny, because it's a type of transaction that happens in the mind. Basically, the purchaser gives a worthless handkerchief to the seller, and the seller, in his mind's eye, sells it to the purchaser. So since these things happen, this type of kinyan, this type of transaction, this type of purchase transaction can happen through the use of something less than a pruta. The isha b'pachos mishava pruta, we go to Amabeis, loy mekanya nafsha. She's not agreeing to sell herself for something less than a pruta. She has dignity, and when the man is going to give her a cheap handkerchief that worth nothing, and she has to, in her mind, sell herself to the husband, that's not going to work. Although, I point out to you that a man could purchase his wife by writing it on a document, a piece of paper that's not worth anything, and say Harei Mukudash Li Shtar, since it's written down and it's a paper that she keeps. So maybe and it's learned from a Gezeres, a posik, the Yatzav HaHaisa, that just like Gittin works on pieces of paper, so Kedushin works on pieces of paper, even if it's less than a pruta. But here, this type of chalipin was only used. It wasn't the way Avram Avinu purchased his maras machpelah. It's a derivation that just like a field can be purchased with kesef, and it could also be purchased with chalipin. I would have thought that a woman could be purchased with chalipin. So the Gemara says that a woman, in her mind's eye, if she receives a handkerchief not worth anything, she's not going to agree to sell herself to her husband. So therefore, that's what the counting in the first part of the Mishnah is trying to exclude. The chalipin will not work. Minyana the sefer l'mute chalitza. The end of the Mishnah that says that a woman goes free is if the husband dies or if she gets a get. What's that trying to exclude? Chalitza. The chalitza process will not work just to divorce a regular woman. Because I would have thought, in a Yavama who did not yet marry her Yavam, I would have learned the idea that chalitza would work from a Yavama. My Yavama, she'eni yoytze beget. To get rid of a Yavama, it's not enough a get. You have to actually give a chalitza. Yoytze b'chalitza. Chalitza should, only chalitza is effective. Zu, a regular woman, she yoytze beget, that goes out with a get. Certainly chalitza would work on a regular woman. I would think so. Kamash malam, that chalitza doesn't work. You need either a get or misa sabal if the husband dies. Otherwise, she doesn't go free. So the Gemara says, why don't we say so that chalitza should work on a regular woman? Answers the Gemara, because it works. It obviously works by Yavama. Amakra, because the pasuk says by a married woman, sefer creases, that only a document severs the relationship. Sefer karsa, only a document can sever a relationship between a man and wife. The ein dava acha karsa, and nothing else can sever that relationship, not chalitza. Nu Gemara. The kesef. We learned in the Mishnah that a man is koina in isha by kesef, use of money. So the question is, minolan, how do you know? Now the Gemara previously gave you the bottom line, that you learn kicha from Steyefron. But that's only because this Gemara builds up to that limud. So the Gemara says, Kesef, how do you know minolan? That's in Jewish joke, you always say when a guy says he's going to learn in Kailo and there's no money, you ask him Kesef minolan, where are you going to have the money from? That's based on this Gemara. But anyway, Kesef minolan, how do you know you could acquire a woman with money? The two, and another question, we learned in the Mishnah, a father could sell his daughter, whether she's 7 years old or 12 years old. He sells it into marriage, brings her into marriage by accepting on her behalf kesef shtar rabia. But we see kesef works. You give the money to the father. Minolan. So the Gemara's question is twofold. Minolan the mekayim kesef. How do you know kesef works for a kedushin? The kesef, and that money the avua who belongs to the father. How do you know that the father keeps the money? Maybe the money should go to the girl herself. Amar Rabbi Yehuda Amar Rav. So Yehuda says in the name of Rab, the Amakra, there's a pasuk says, when an Amma of Riyah, a girl that was sold into slavery, a Jewish slavery, so when she goes free, let's say after 6 years, the Torah says, V'yatzachinam, she goes free, this little girl goes free. Let's say she was sold as a maid at age 4. So at age 10, she goes free. Ein kasef, you don't have to give money back to the original master, the master that bought her. So the Gemara says, why does the Torah say if you go free, certainly there's no money? Why does the Chumash say there is no money? So the Chumash is telling you, Ein kasef l'adam zeh. When this girl leaves this master, the master she's working for, there's no money to be paid to the master. But when she leaves another master, the other master is her father. When she leaves her father, then there is money that has to be paid to the father. Who is that money belong to? Of the father. So that's a source that when a man takes a little girl in marriage, he has to give, he can do it through kesef, but he has to give the kesef to the father. So the Gemara's question is, maybe the kesef belongs to her, maybe she keeps the kesef, the money, and says the Gemara, how does that make sense? Avia Makabel Kedusha, the father decides who she's going to marry. He decides, this daughter I'm giving to this person. That's a pasuk in Chumash. So he's deciding who she's going to marry. The EU shakla kaspa, and she should take the money. The Gemara says that wouldn't make too much sense. So the money should belong to the father. So the Gemara asks, let us say, when does the Chumash say that the money, the money is based on the father, goes to the father because he decided who she's going to marry, is only said by Katana, that if she's still a Katana, if she's still, let's say, under 12 years old, so then you say the money belongs to the father, the less loyad l'kabel kedushin, because she has no power to accept the kedushin. Avanara the is loyad l'kabel kedushin. As a nara, she has a power because she's over bas mitzvah. She could accept kedushin on her own behalf. Tigdish Ian Nafsha, so she should be able to decide who she's marrying, Vesiskal Kaspa, and she should be able to take the money. And yet the other way, this happens by a Nara, a 12-year-old, maybe she can decide who she wants to marry, but the money that she's going to receive belongs to the father. Why does it belong to the father? So let's answer that question. Amakra, because the pasuk says, Benurea Beisavia, that a 12-year-old girl belongs to her father. That's the Chumash that says that the father can nullify any neder, any vow that a 12-year-old makes. So what is it? So we darshan from that pasuk, kol shevach nurim, any profit that a 12-year-old makes, le'avia, belongs to her father. That's a pasuk. So it seems to say that the kesef kedushin belongs to the father. So now the Gemara asks, if that was true, how do you know that the wages of a girl belong to her father? She's working as an accountant somewhere, as a 12-year-old girl, belongs to the father. How do you know? So Rav says there's another source. Shnema, pasuk says, when a man will sell his daughter, le'ama, to a maid, well, certainly he's selling to a maid. Why does it say that he's selling his daughter to a maid, as a maid? Because the Torah wants you to compare a maid to the daughter. A regular maid, whatever she earns, belongs to her master. Abbas, every daughter, no matter, even if she's 12 years old, whatever profit she makes belongs to her father. Now that's why Rab brought a separate parsik of to show that the profits that the woman makes belongs to her father. So the question is, why didn't Rav learn it from the pasuk of Benurera Beisavia that says that anything that the girl does at 12 years old belongs to her father? Ella, the reason why Rav didn't want to learn from that pasuk, that pasuk was saying that just gives the right to father to nullify vows that she makes. So therefore, that's why Rav needed a new pasuk, that a girl who earns wages, he needed a new pasuk to show that it belongs to the father. So Hakanami, so therefore we should not be able to learn that the Kesef Kedusha belongs to the father from Benurera Beisavia, because that pasuk is talking about Ba'afaris Nadarim Hu Diksiv. That's only gives the right to the father to nullify the promises, but that does not give him the right to accept the Kesef Kedusha. The Chitema, you're going to say, let's learn from there. We don't learn that just because the father has rights on the woman to nullify this girl, to nullify her vows, that doesn't give him rights to accept money on her behalf. Maybe the money belongs to her. There's another chumash that says that any fines that are given to the girl, let's say somebody raped her or whatever, that belongs to the father. Let's learn from here that just like rape money belongs to the father, so also Kedushin money belongs to the father. So as a 12-year-old, if she accepts Kedushin money, she has to give it to the father. We don't learn that. The fact that she keeps that he gets the knas fines doesn't mean that he can accept regular money that she receives on Kedushin money. Let's learn from embarrassment and loss of value that the Chumash says that when someone rapes a woman, so the girl, so then he, besides paying a regular fine, he has to pay a certain money value of humiliation, that he humiliated this girl and she's now worth less because she's not a besula anymore. So, and that belongs to the father too. And that's not a fine, that's a mamoina. So the Gemara says we can't learn from there that the kes of Kedushin money belongs to the father. Why? Because because the humiliation and the loss of value is actually damages that are felt by the father. Because when he sees his daughter damaged like that after being raped, he cannot just give her off to somebody for marriage who probably would have paid him a lot of money if he would have given her off to marriage. So therefore, Boishas and Begam belong to him. But you still don't have a source of how do you know a regular girl, if you give money to a 12-year-old girl and she accepts Kedusha money, she has to give it to her father. Where do you see that? So the Gemara, and this is where we'll end. Another minute. Ala Mistabra, it's logical. The Karsik says that when a girl leaves her master, she worked 6 years as a maid, she leaves, there's no money being paid over there. The Chi Koma Mayit, the Torah limits and says, Yitzia, we go to top of Amar Aleph, the Yitzia, the Kavasa Kama Ayat. That the way it goes out, very similar way. Just like if there would have been money when a girl left her master, the money would have gone to the master. So also, when she leaves her father, so he's now considered his master. So any money, the Chumash is saying, would belong to the father. So the Gemara says, because it's a similar leaving of jurisdiction. When a girl leaves the master, so she's going as a free woman. When a father gives his daughter over into marriage, or she accepts Kedushin from somebody else, she's now a free woman and breaking off ties with her father. So therefore, the money that the Chumash says that's in that process will now belong to the father. So the Gemara says, when they're not comparable. When a girl leaves the master, it's not similar to when she leaves her father. When a girl leaves as a free woman, she's leaving her master completely, and the former master has no jurisdiction over here. Over here, she still needs to go to chuppah over here, and when a girl needs to go to chuppah, so she's not totally left her father's house. In fact, the husband will not yarshin her. She's only has erisin, and therefore she's somewhat still tied to her father. So how can you say that the money that she's totally leaving her father? Answers the Gemara, with regards to nullifying vows, it's no more up to the father. At the time we learned in the Mishnah, when a girl gets engaged, a 12-year-old gets engaged, it's a partnership. The father and the husband now are the people that only as a group can they nullify her vows. It's not the father alone. So because she's actually leaving her father, so what the Chumash said, and this is going to be the source so far, and we'll continue this discussion tomorrow. Where we're holding right now is with the source that you're mekadesh a girl with money is from this source. The Torah says when a girl who's a maid leaves her master, there is no money in that process. But the Pasuk seems to say that when a regular girl leaves her father, there is money in that transaction because she's totally leaving her father because he can no longer nullify Nedarim, and therefore the money will go to her father. So we see the concept in the Chumash that when a person acquires a girl for Eresid, the concept is that you can acquire her via Kesef. As Hashem will continue tomorrow.